Now, Vermont Senator and former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders discusses the future of the Democratic Party and the incoming administration. He was a guest speaker at the Christian Science Monitor breakfast here in Washington, D.C. It's just under an hour.
This is the monitor calling to tell me that we're out of money. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, that'd be great. At least you can laugh.
Probably not the best career move, but anyway. Okay, here we go, folks. Thanks for coming. I'm Dave Cook from the Christian Science Monitor. Our guest today is Bernie Sanders, senator from Vermont and new member of the Democratic senatorial leadership. His last visit with our group was in June 2015, and we appreciate his coming back. And we're very pleased that Jane Sanders is joining us this morning for our low-cal breakfast. Our speaker was born in Brooklyn, graduated from the University of Chicago in '68, moved to Vermont, worked as a carpenter and later as a writer, was elected mayor of Burlington in 1981, served four terms in that post. In '90, was elected as Vermont's at-large member of the U.S. House and served there until he won a seat in the U.S. Senate in 2006 and was overwhelmingly reelected in 2012. As this morning's crowd around the breakfast table underscores, Senator Sanders made a spirited run for the 2016 Democratic presidential nomination, the subject of his new book, Our Revolution, A Future to Believe In. And thus endeth the biographical portion of the program. Now on to the ever so compelling ground rules. As always, we're on the record here. Please, no live blogging or tweeting. In short, no filing of any kind while the breakfast is underway to give us time to actually listen to what our guest says. There's no embargo when the session ends. We'll probably end at 10:02, given our late start. To help you curb that relentless selfie urge, we'll email several pictures of the session to all the reporters here as soon as the breakfast ends. As regular attendees know, if you'd like to ask a question, please do the traditional thing and send me a subtle, non-threatening signal, and I'll happily call on as many reporters as we can get to in the time we have with the senator this morning. Given the number of reporters here this morning, I'm going to limit myself to one question and ask that you try to do so. I realize that's probably hope over experience on my part. We'll start off by offering our guests the opportunity to make some opening comments. Then we'll move to questions from around the table. And with that, sir, thanks again for doing this. The floor is yours.
Well, Dave, thank you very much for inviting me to be with you this morning. And let me thank everybody for being here. To say the least, these are interesting times for our country. And let me begin by telling you that just yesterday, my office from Vermont, a small state, received many, many hundreds of telephone calls urging President-elect Trump to withdraw his appointment of Mr. Bannon to be a major advisor to him. And I think what we are seeing all over this country is extraordinary fear about a president who in his career, before he ran for president, led the so-called birther movement, which was a racist effort to undermine the legitimacy of our first African-American president. There is great fear among the immigrant community that their families may be broken up and driven out of this country. There is fear of people of the Muslim faith about what might happen to them. As I think everybody here knows, this country for hundreds of years has struggled with the issues of discrimination, starting with our attitude toward the Native American people. We have struggled with racism, we have struggled with sexism, we have struggled with homophobia. We have struggled with discrimination against Italians and Irish and Jews and everybody else. That's been our history. And we have a right to be very proud that overcoming a lot of bigotry, we have moved forward to create a less discriminatory society. And I will tell you, having been around this country over the last year, that there is no generation in American history that is less discriminatory than is the young generation today. I would hope very much that President-elect Trump understands the fear and anxiety of his attitudes on race, on his attitude toward women, and would try to make the American people feel comfortable, more comfortable. And I hope that he would do it by rescinding the nomination of Mr. Bannon. Second point that I want to make is that Mr. Trump, and I'd like to get into this during the course of our discussion, campaigned as a populist, campaigned as somebody who was anti-establishment. I have zero doubt that he received the support of many working class people all across this country because some of the positions that he took. He said he is not going to cut Social Security. He is not going to cut Medicare. He is not going to cut Medicaid. Well, I was glad to hear that, and we look forward to working with him to make sure that he does not cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. He talked about raising the minimum wage to $10 an hour. Well, that's not high enough for me, but it's better than $7.25 an hour, and we look forward to working with him to raise the minimum wage. The point is, during the campaign, he said a lot, and we will find out soon enough whether what he said was sincere, whether in fact he is prepared to take on the drug companies who charge us the highest prices in the world and move to reimportation, allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He said a lot, and our job is to hold him accountable, and we intend to do that. Last point that I want to make, an issue that gets very little discussion, but it happens to be one of the great planetary crises that we face. Mr. Trump campaigned as somebody who believes that climate change is a quote-unquote hoax. Mr. Trump is wrong. Climate change is not a hoax. Climate change, according to the scientific community, is one of the great threats to this planet. And I would hope very much, Donald Trump is nobody's fool. He is a smart guy. And I would hope very much that he recognizes that that point of view that he has is way out of touch with what the scientific community believes. I would hope that he would bring scientists into his administration, into his office, and discuss with them the threat of climate change and the need to transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. The future of the planet, to a significant degree, rests on that, because if the United States turns away from combating climate change, there is no reason to believe that China, Russia, India, other large countries will not do the same. So I would hope that Mr. Trump takes the time to listen to the scientific community and meet with them. Thank you, David.
Thank you. I'm going to hold off on a question myself so we can go to my colleagues around the table. Let me tell you who's signed up so far: Andrea Mitchell, Kevin Hall, Chuck Rosh, Caitlin Huey Burns, Francine Kiefer, Olivier Knox, John Salant, Teddy Davis, John Gizzi, Josh Green, Caitlin McNeil, Marisha Schultz, Herb Jackson, and Daniel Strauss.
That's all.
That should hold us for the morning. Andrea, do you want to start?
Thank you very much. Thank you, and Senator, welcome. You said last night, in answer to a question, that maybe you could have won against Donald Trump, given his populist message, given your populist message. Do you think you could have won? Could you have won as a general election candidate and done well in the Rust Belt the way...
Let me say this.
And let me just follow by what do you think, not only what do you think went wrong, but what do you think Democrats need to do as a party now?
Andrew, at the end of that book, there is a chapter on the corporate media. And the essence of it is that we spend too much time on political gossip, too little time discussing the real issues facing the American people. So I'm not going to answer. It doesn't matter. I don't know if I could have won. Who knows? But it doesn't make much sense to me to be looking backward. Right now, this country faces enormous crises. We have a middle class which is in decline. We have massive levels of income and wealth inequality. And we have a President-elect Trump who concerns many, many people who, by the way, as all of you know, I think by the time the last vote is counted, will have lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton by perhaps as much as 2 million votes. But I will answer the second question, Andrea. And I think it is time for soul-searching within the Democratic Party. The evidence is pretty clear that when you lose the White House in a campaign against a gentleman who I believe will enter the White House as the least popular candidate in the history of this country, when you lose the Senate, when you lose the House, when you lose 2/3 of state governments, governance chairs in this country, when you've lost some 900 seats in legislatures around the country in the last 8 years, I think it is time for the Democratic Party to reassess what it stands for and where it wants to go. And I think at the end of the day, the Democratic Party has got to make a fundamental decision. And it goes back to an old song of Woody Guthrie. Some of you may have heard of Woody Guthrie. And the song is, "Which side are you on? Which side are you on?" And it is, in my view, I speak only for myself, not possible to be a candidate of corporate America, not possible to be a candidate of the insurance companies or Wall Street, not take huge amounts of money from powerful special interests, and then say, well, I am going to champion the needs of a declining middle class. I'm going to champion and fight for the needs of working class people or low-income people. I don't think you can do that. And I think you got to make a decision as to which side you are on. And I think at a time when the middle class is shrinking, when you got 43 million people living in poverty, when you got moms out there who cannot afford childcare, when you got millions of people getting ripped off by the pharmaceutical industry, when we're the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a right, the only major country not to provide paid family and medical leave, when we have more income and wealth inequality than any other major country, the time is now for the Democratic Party to say, we're going to stand with the working families, we're taking on the billionaire class, we are taking on Wall Street, we're taking on the insurance companies. That is my view.
We're going to go to Kevin Hall, who I bet has a budget question for you, sir.
You are correct.
From McClatchy.
I'll note that Arlo Guthrie also reported which side you are. Neither here nor there, but it's an organization that tries not to do the gossip. Let's talk about the budget and what you'll be the ranking member. What is your expectation, and what can you do to slow down a process? Is your expectation that we're going to blow holes in deficits? This corporate tax reform is going to be dynamically scored. It sounds, if you parse the words, it sounds like we're talking a not trickle down, but similar to what Kansas has tried without much tax cuts are going to bring growth. Talk about what you can do and what you're going to have to do.
Well, thank you. I think, as I indicated, and as I think we can all agree, Donald Trump ran one of the most unusual campaigns, and it turned out to be a very successful campaign. And he said many things to many people. And one of the things that I think you will see, just to divert a moment from the question, is when he talked about ideas that will improve life for working people, like taking on the pharmaceutical industry or not cutting Social Security, you're going to see some of us working with them. But to answer your question, you're quite right. On the other hand, what he also campaigned on, and I will call it trickle-down economic theory, giving huge, if I may use that word, tax breaks to the very, very wealthiest people in this country and to the largest corporations. And then, just magically, which is the essence of trickle-down economic theories, all of these folks are going to reinvest in our economy. They're going to create jobs. We're going to see an increase in tax revenue, and everybody lives happily ever after. It is a wonderful idea, except it has never worked, and I think it's a fraudulent idea. So if the question is, will many of us vigorously combat the idea of trickle-down economic theory and giving tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this country and large profitable corporations? Absolutely. I know we talk about tax reform. Well, it's a funny thing. As you know, I've been running around this country for the last year and a half talking about a grossly unfair tax system which benefits the wealthy and large corporations. And then in one day, during the campaign, Donald Trump did more to educate the American people about the unfairness of our tax system than I did in a year and a half. Because he went before the American people and he said, I am a multi-billionaire. I've got mansions all over the world. I live in the lap of luxury. I don't have to pay any federal income tax. All right? And he told the American people just how unfair and how stupid our current tax system is. Well, if I have anything to say about it, Donald Trump and his billionaire friends will start paying their fair share of taxes. And we've got to move to prevent corporations, not only in our country, but from all over the world, stashing their money in tax havens, costing governments all over this world trillions of dollars in needed tax revenue.
We're going to go to Chuck Rosh of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Chuck.
Thank you for doing this, Dave, and thank you, Senator. I'd like to take your corporate media chapter into a postscript into this morning. The last time I checked, you had 7 million or so followers on 2 Twitter accounts. You had 5 million likes on Facebook, that sort of thing. And as you know, there's been a discussion since the election about fake news on these sites and their impact on it. And in fact, BuzzFeed's out this morning with a story that says in the final 3 months of the U.S. presidential election, the top performing fake election news sites on Facebook outperformed, the 20 stories on there outperformed the 19 legitimate websites, New York Times and others like that. Facebook is a $320 billion company. It's larger than GE, it's larger than Walmart, it's larger than a lot of American corporations. First, are you concerned, A, about that phenomenon on the election, fake news on the election? And secondly, do you put Facebook in this sphere of corporate media influence that you talk about?
That's the great question. And by definition, the figures that you gave should concern all of us. And I can't give you a definitive answer on it. Am I concerned? Absolutely. I don't have to tell the people in this room, you know it all better than I do, the changing face of media in America. And I have my concerns about media, but it is, the point that you're raising is another whole area. That there are millions and millions of people who are getting their information from fake news, from people who have a very prejudiced, non-fact-based reality point of view, is of course frightening. And I can't give you a magical answer to how we deal with it, but it is very hard to be running a democracy or living in a democracy where you have a set of ideas that you just read in the internet which have nothing to do with reality. Not you, in general. I didn't mean to make it personal. But that is the scary stuff. How do we can argue tax policy when we start off with a basic set of premises, right? And you disagree and we go from there. That's called democracy. It's a good thing. But if you start off with a set of facts, quote unquote facts, that have no basis in reality, we got trouble. So you've asked a very, very important question. I wish I could give you a better answer, but it is something that we have got to think about hard.
Very short follow, Dave. Are you, in using it as an organizing influence in the way you used it in the election, are you exacerbating it? Did you exacerbate it?
No. We try to put, do we use it? Absolutely. Is it fake news? No. I'm not going to tell you everything that we've ever put out. The thousands of things that we put out are all correct, but we take seriously what we put out. Do we use it as an organizing tool? Of course.
We're going to go to Kate. I'm sorry.
If I was going to speak in California and we have the list of many thousands of Californians in the area, will we alert them to the fact that I'm speaking? Will we tell people some of the things that I am talking about? Of course we will. I think that's a positive step. That's a positive step.
We're going to go to Caitlin Huey-Burns from Real Clear Politics.
Hi, Senator. Thank you. There's a lot of talk right now about who, as the president prepares to leave the White House, who's the leader of the Democratic Party. Do you consider yourself to fill that role? And also, if so, or if not, who is? And also, are you planning to join the Democratic Party after in your next election?
Well, I'll let others determine who the leader. Chuck Schumer is I voted for Chuck. I think Chuck Schumer is going to be doing an excellent job in a very, very difficult environment. And his job is to bring together the diverse points of view within the Democratic caucus. Nancy Pelosi, if Nancy is reelected to that position, or whoever is elected, is going to have an equally difficult job. Those are the leaders of the congressional Democratic Party. We don't know who the leader of the DNC will be. I am supporting Keith Ellison because, as I mentioned a moment ago, I think it's time for the Democratic Party to reform itself, to become a grassroots party prepared to take on big money interest. To answer your specific question, I was elected last election as an independent. I will finish this term as an independent.
We're going to go to Francine Kiefer from the Monitor. Francine.
Hey, Francine.
Hi. More on Chuck Schumer, the new leader of the Democrats in the Senate. A very open question and then a more focused one. Just what are your hopes and concerns about Schumer as the leader of Democrats? And more pointedly, he has obviously very deep ties to Wall Street and banking, antithetical to one of your points of view. So if you could address that as well.
Well, Chuck can more than ably speak for himself. And so I'm not going to speak. And I'm sure you'll have the opportunity to be chatting with Chuck Schumer on his views on all kinds of subjects. I have known Chuck. Chuck and I were in the House together, and I knew him a long time ago. We were both on the Banking Committee, Financial Services Committee. And Chuck is, in the best sense of the word, a very good politician. He knows how to bring people together. He knows how to seize the moment. His support was, I believe, unanimous. And I think, for any leader, whether you're a Republican leader or a Democratic leader, and Paul Ryan has the same problem, is how do you bring your diverse voices together? And I think Chuck is probably the best qualified person we have to do just that.
Can you do a sentence or two on your new role as outreach chair? What does an outreach chair do?
That's exactly what we're thinking about right now. Anyone has any ideas, let me know. I'm trying to figure it out. But, I just got this title yesterday, so I can't give you a definitive. But it is actually something that I look forward to doing. And here is, without offending anybody in the room, I know I never offend anybody, so, is the real action to transform America is not going to take place on Capitol Hill. It's going to take place at grassroots America. It's going to take place among millions of people who are struggling economically right now, among young people, among people who are concerned about the environment. And I initially understand my role to be to bring those people into the political process to demand that the United States Congress, the United States government, the new president represent the needs of all of the people and not just the people on top. So I'm really excited about it. How we go about doing it, I don't know. All of you know, maybe we don't know it. The voter turnout was what, 53, 54%? Was that what we think it was? Which is low. It is low for us in recent years, and it is much lower than other countries. Why is it that tens of millions of people, poor people, working people, young people, do not get involved in the political process? So certainly one of the goals of that position for me is to bring people into politics, to make people aware that politics is not just election day. Election days are very, very important, but the other 364 days a year are also important. If you are concerned about racism or homophobia or climate change or income and wealth inequality, how do you get involved in the political process other than voting once every 4 years for president? Well, there are ways, and that's one of the challenges that I will be looking to tackle.
Olivier Knox from Yahoo.
Thank you, Senator. I know you're very fond of what you've called political gossip, but I hope as a fellow Vermonter you'll give me a little latitude on this.
It depends. Where are you from in Vermont?
Born in Burlington, raised in Middlebury.
Yeah, you're doing all right here.
I'm doing okay? Do I want to know where what places would not have been okay? You talked at the outset about the appointment of Mr. Bannon at the White House. I'm wondering how you think Democrats should handle cabinet nominations and the very real likelihood of a Supreme Court nomination that they will probably oppose on balance. Should you forswear the use of the filibuster? How should Democrats approach those decisions?
That's a great question, and again, I can't give you, having been in leadership for all of one day, I'm not going to give you a definitive answer. But I think here are some of the areas that have to be taken into consideration. I think, again, let me be very clear. I happen to think that Donald Trump is a very smart person, and he would not have elected president if he were not a very smart person. And I would hope very much, and also I have no doubt that he, in his way, loves this country. And I would hope very much that given his background, and given some of what I consider to be terrible, terrible things that he has said on the campaign trail to minorities, I would hope that he understands he has an extraordinary opportunity, an unbelievable opportunity to say, you know what, I said things, and again, I don't say this as a criticism. Mr. Trump changes his views very often. That's his style. You all know that. And the American people would be very anxious to hear him say, look, I said terrible things. I apologize, okay? I am not going to be a president leading a racist or a sexist or a homophobic or an Islamophobic administration. I want to focus on the real issues facing the American people, many of which he touched upon during his campaign. He talked about a collapsing working class in America. He's right. And we're going to have to work together to address those issues. How do you create the millions of jobs that Mr. Trump correctly said we needed to correct? Well, we're going to have to create. We're going to have to work together to do that. How do you raise wages? He doesn't like Obamacare. Well, presumably he's not going to go to my alternative, which is a Medicare for all single-payer program. I think that is the way we should be going. What is his idea? It's not good enough to say, I have a great idea or an excellent program. Well, healthcare is fairly complicated. You got to go into the details a little bit more than saying he has an excellent idea. What is it? Should we join the rest of the world and guarantee health care to every man, woman, and child? How do you lower the cost of health care? He said during the campaign he was going to take on the pharmaceutical industry, which is a group ripping off the American people, charging us the highest prices in the world. I look forward to working with him. But if he is serious about those important issues, it will be absolutely the right thing for him to do for so many reasons. To forget about the racism, forget about the Islamophobia, forget about trying to throw millions of people out of this country. Let's focus on the real issues that we face.
John Salant from New Jersey Advanced Media.
Your New Jersey State Campaign Chairman, Assemblyman John Wisniewski,
I may very well. I know John a little bit, and I've had the opportunity to meet John, and I look forward. I think I've got a call that's going to be made to John, but I do very much appreciate it made in New Jersey.
Are you going to support him?
I may very well. I've got to talk to him, and I have not.
We're going to back in the cheap seats. We're going to go to Teddy Davis from CNN. Teddy.
Thank you, Senator. I want to ask you about one specific part of Trump's trade agenda. I know over the years you've opposed a series of trade agreements, but in his contract with the American voter, he called for establishing tariffs to impose them on companies to discourage them from laying off workers. Do you support imposing tariffs?
Well, he said, among other things, and I was in Indiana a number of months ago during my campaign, talking to the workers there, United Technologies, the home carrier. And Mr. Trump said he's going to make sure that those jobs stay in the United States, if my memory is correct. And he said that on I think with Nabisco as well. I think it is high time that corporate America understand that they cannot get the benefits of being American corporations while at the same time they're turning their backs on America's working class. In the case of Carrier, my recollection is, and I may not have it 100% right, but I believe some years ago, not too many years ago, United Technologies had the resources to provide a $71 million severance package to its former CEO, $71 million. A golden parachute. And yet they think they can save some money by shutting down plants in Indiana, moving to Mexico and hiring people there for $3 an hour. I will do everything that I can to stop those types of transactions. And in that area, I look forward to working with Mr. Trump to tell corporate America, you know what? You cannot keep running all over the world, whether it's China or Vietnam or God knows where, searching for the cheapest possible labor while you destroy the middle class and working class of this country. So I do look forward to coming up with ideas that tell corporate America, and a tariff may well be one of them, may well be one of those options. But I think corporate America, which is doing phenomenally well by and large corporations are making huge profits. They're stashing their profits in the Cayman Islands. In a given year, corporations like General Electric, others, will not pay a nickel in federal corporate taxes. That is absurd. And if Mr. Trump has the guts to stand up to those corporations, demand that they stop paying their fair share of taxes, demand that they create jobs in America and protect jobs in America, he will have an ally with me.
Here comes John Gizzi from Newsmax with a two-parter, sir.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Senator, for being here this morning. Yes, I do have a two-parter about Mr. Trump's promises. One, what would you think of him, or what do you think of his vow to prosecute Secretary Clinton after the election? And two, one issue in which he is a soulmate with you, in fact, the Republican platform is a soulmate, is the revival of the Glass-Steagall Act.
Exactly.
I covered the platform committee when it was put in there, and I called it the Sanders Amendment. Is that something you want to work with him and other Republicans on?
Absolutely. You're right. He has talked about reestablishing Glass-Steagall. And I think that is a step forward. Without going into a great discourse here, I am one of those who does believe that financial deregulation brought about during the Clinton administration, which allowed commercial banks and investor banks and large insurance companies to merge, created the pathway forward to the collapse of 2008. And I strongly believe that we should reestablish what we call a 21st century Glass-Steagall legislation. And if Mr. Trump was sincere, and here is the point, and we're going to learn all of this, and the American people are going to learn it pretty quickly. He said a whole lot of things. Was he serious, or were these just, campaign slogans out there to gain some votes?
It's in the Republican platform.
Well, yes. But the point that I want to make is that we will hold him accountable. That is a very important issue. Reestablishment of a 21st century Glass-Steagall is something I believe in. I think millions of Americans believe in it, and I would look forward to working with him. And we will see whether he will keep his word and take on Wall Street in doing that. In terms of your other question, it would be almost beyond comprehension to think that a new president would be involved in the prosecution of his opponent, who ended up getting some 2 million more votes than he did. We read about these things and we see these things in non-democratic countries all over the world. I mean, every year you all report how in some country around the world somebody wins an election and his opponent ends up in jail or is prosecuted. This is the United States of America. We do not prosecute our political opponents and try to throw them in jail. That would completely, I think, make it would completely divide this country. It would be an outrage, and I would hope very, very, very much that Mr. Trump understands that that is not something that he should do.
We're going to go to Josh Green from Bloomberg. Josh?
Thanks, Senator. Does the Democratic Party have a message that can reach working class voters, and in particular the white working class voters who have abandoned the party en masse?
That is exactly what it seems to me the Democratic Party has got to do are several things. First of all, we have got to build on the current base We have got to be extraordinarily supportive of women who are fighting, among other things, for their right to control their own health needs, who are fighting for equal pay for equal work. We have got to be closely aligned and continue to work as part of a coalition with the African American community, who have their very, very serious concerns about high unemployment rates in African American communities. We've got to continue working with the Latino community, who are now under the gun in terms of some of the ideas that Mr. Trump brought forth during his campaign. And I should point out that the African American community, the Latino community, is largely a working class community. But of course we have got to work with the white working class as well, the class that I personally come from. And that means that we have got to bring forth an economic message which says that we're going to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, in my view, $15 an hour, that we say to women, whether you're black or white or Latino or Asian American, that you're going to get equal pay for equal work, that we are going to create millions of jobs by rebuilding our infrastructure, that you say to the white working class and the black working class and the Latino working class that in today's world, in a competitive global economy, your kids have the right, if they do well in high school, they have the qualifications, to go to a public college or university tuition free, that we address the crisis of health care in which so many white workers, black workers, Latino workers don't have health care coverage, paying a high cost of prescription drugs. In other words, to answer your question, it's not either or. It is having an economic message which says that we will not allow the billionaire class in corporate America to get it all, that we're going to rebuild a disappearing middle class. Now, one of the problems Democrats have had, in my view, is that they have made the point correctly that any objective assessment of the economy today, any objective assessment, tells us that we are far, far better than we were 8 years ago when Bush left office. No one can deny it. No one in this room can deny that unemployment is much lower, that the deficit is much lower. We're not in the midst of a world financial crisis. No one can deny that. On the other hand, what the Democrats, I think, too often have ignored, that for 40 years, that while we're better off today than we were 8 years ago, over a 40-year period under Democratic and Republican administrations, the middle class of this country has been shrinking. Real wages for American workers, white workers, have gone down. Income inequality has gone up. Too many people can't afford health care, can't afford to send their kids to college, can't afford child care. Those are real issues, and the Democratic Party has got to address them. So to answer your question, absolutely. I think we can create a platform which appeals to white workers, to black workers, to Latino workers, to women, and that is a platform that brings a vast majority of the American people together.
Caitlin McNeil from Talking Points Memo. A little louder for those like me who need it a little louder.
No problem. You talked about, you praised Schumer and the Senate leadership elections. There's been some grumbles about changes in House leadership. Do you, and you're supporting a shakeup at the DNC. Do you support shakeup in House leadership as well?
No, I'm not. I served 16 years in the House. I'm not there now, and I'll let the folks in the House, make their own best decision. But at the DNC, again, I think here's a problem, and I would hope that media would pay more attention to this very serious problem. As a result of Citizens United, we have a situation, as you all know, where billionaires like the Koch brothers and others, Sheldon Adelson, can pour unlimited sums of money into political campaigns through independent expenditures. In the very first chapter of the book, we deal with that. We deal with what I fear is a growing movement toward oligarchy in this country, which not only impacts us economically, it impacts us politically, because billionaires can now spend as much money as they want on campaigns. And if anybody here thinks that that does not have an impact, I think you would be mistaken. But here's something else that that worries me very, very much. That for many Republican leaders, Citizens United did not go far enough. The Koch brothers have always believed that their goal is to eliminate all campaign finance limitations and restrictions. So right now they can spend unlimited sums of money on independent expenditures. They want to go further and be able to give a check for $1 billion to their candidate for president, or their, whatever it is, $100 million to their candidate for the U.S. Senate directly, and control those campaigns. This is something that the DNC and our new leadership are going to have to deal with, not only in opposing those outrageous, undemocratic ideas, but in figuring out how we rally and bring the American people together at the grassroots level to make sure that money can not buy elections.
So I'm going to do a quick time check. It's 9:48. We're going to go to 10:02. We're not going to get to everybody, but let me tell you the list as I've seen it so far. Marissa Schultz from The Post, Herb Jackson from USA Today, Daniel Strauss from Politico, Jeff Seleny from CNN, Emily Cadet from Newsweek, Janet Hook from The Journal, and Eric Garcia from The Hill. We'll do the best we can. Marissa from The Post. We have just
You're not going to be a good United States Senator if you have that.
Herb Jackson from USA Today. Thank you, Marissa.
Senator, looking forward to 2020, could you give us your thoughts about who you think might be your Democratic standard bearer, and do you have any thoughts on Cory Booker?
I read the last chapter of my book on corporate media. I think this is incredible, and I have to say this in all due respect. Are we ready? We haven't inaugurated this president, and we're talking about 2020 because it's easy to write about. What about talking about climate change and whether the planet survives? What about talking about income and wealth inequality in America? What about talking about youth unemployment in African American communities of 30–40%? What about talking about immigration reform, criminal justice reform? Those are the issues that the American people need to be engaged in. To start talking about who's going to be running in 2080, and look at you, you look like a good candidate. I mean, how much money do you have? Maybe we'll run you. I mean, I don't mean to be rude, but the American people are tired of that. They really are. They would like to hear serious discussion on serious issues. Who's running in 2020 or 2090 is of concern. And I got to tell you, people are turning off their TVs. They are tired of, all of that stuff. So in all due respect, we got serious problems in this country. And let's talk about the serious issues and not worry who's going to be running in 4 years when we haven't even inaugurated the president who just won.
Daniel Strauss from Politico.
Moving back to the DNC, there is increasing pressure among various members of the Democratic Party for Congressman Ellison to step down if he does win the chairmanship. Is he able to be both a member of Congress and the DNC chairman? And because I know, it's a little bit of a presumptive question here, why is there pressure and discussion for him to not serve in those roles? Is that reflective of Debbie's tenure?
Well, look, I think it's no great secret that I tell you that I think Debbie Wasserman Schultz was not an outstanding chair of the Democratic Party. But it wasn't because she is a sitting member of the Congress. And I think we have a lot of precedent in the past for DNC leaders to be governors, to be full-time public officials. On the other hand, the argument is a valid argument that especially now it is a very time-consuming job. But the ways to deal with it, I think, is to have the kind of staff that you need, the kind of executive director that you need to handle the whole lot of administrative work that has to be done. So to answer your question, do I think that Keith can remain a United States congressman and do the job? I do. But it is incumbent upon the new chair, whether it's Keith or anybody else, to put together a really dynamite staff. Now, I think the second part of your question is this issue is suddenly being raised. I don't believe it was raised when Debbie took the job. And I think this is just a way for Keith's opponents the usual line is, oh, we love Keith, he's great, but. And that's the but. So I think this is a way for, his opponents to try to, criticize him and end up supporting somebody else. But, I am pleased that Keith has won support, not just from progressives like myself or Elizabeth Warren. I should tell you that, getting back to what we do on social media, my recollection is that over 500,000 people have signed a petition supporting Keith. That's a lot. And he has won support from, people like Chuck Schumer and Harry Reid. So I think he has pretty broad support, and I hope he makes it.
We're going to go next to Jeff Zeleny from CNN. Jeff?
Senator, one backward-looking question here, if you don't mind. Have you spoken to Secretary Clinton in the last week? And what role do you believe she should play in rebuilding the party? Because, as you said, she did win the most popular votes. And finally, do you believe that your criticism of her paid speeches played a role in her defeat?
Well, no. I think at the end of the day, I think my candidacy, to answer your last question, was ending up helpful to her. If we believe that candidates should not be anointed, if we understand that the Republicans had, 17 or 19 candidates for their position, I think a heated, issue-oriented campaign, one in which I'm happy to say my campaign brought millions of people into the political process, the vast majority of whom ended up voting for Hillary Clinton. I think it played a very positive role. I'm sorry, Jeff, the other part of your question?
If you had spoken to her, and what role do you believe?
Well, I was involved in a conference call, and clearly she has a very important role to play. I mean, she ended up getting more votes than Mr. Trump. She was the Democratic nominee for President of the United States. And it goes without saying that she has a very important role to play in the future of the Democratic Party. Does not mean that she and I are going to agree on every issue. Frankly, we are not going to agree on every issue. But her voice is an important voice and certainly needs to be heard.
Emily,
have you spoken to her? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I spoke on a conference call I was involved with. I haven't spoken to her personally.
Emily Cadet from Newsweek, over there.
I know that Donald Trump's election has essentially killed TPP, which you support. Do you also support renegotiating NAFTA and other trade agreements that have already been inked and are in
I think we have a very large trade deficit. I think the evidence, to me, is clear. Maybe not every member of the Chamber of Commerce agrees, but the evidence, to me, is that we have lost millions of jobs as a result of NAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China. You are right. I have been a leader in opposition to the TPP, and I'm glad to see, as I understand it, that it is dead. So if your question is, do I believe we have to fundamentally rethink our trade policies? I do. Now, I'm not here to say that I think, nor have I ever thought, that trade in itself is bad. Trade is a good thing. We all, every time we sit down and we buy something, we are essentially trading. So I think trade is a good thing, but we need trade policies that work for the American worker and not just for the CEOs of large multinational corporations. So to answer your question, yeah, I think we should take a hard look at all of our trade policies and come up with a different set of proposals based on fair trade. Trade which is fair to American workers, fair to people in other countries, not just unfettered free trade, which has been a disaster for millions of American workers.
Janet Hook from the Wall Street Journal.
Senator, thank you for coming out. You spoke about the many areas of potential agreement between you and Donald Trump, that you'd be ready to work with him on infrastructure or minimum wage. There's another school of thought that Democrats should be more kind of confrontational and kind of flat out oppositional to Trump, following from the way Mitch McConnell and the Republicans dealt with President Obama. Could you speak to that thought?
Well, I think, as I've indicated, there are areas where, from my perspective, there can be no compromise. I will not compromise with racism, and I will not compromise with sexism, and I will not compromise with homophobia, and I will not compromise with Islamophobia. In a democracy, what is deeply ingrained, I hope, in all of us and all of the American people is the understanding that on many of the policy issues we have discussed this morning, honest people have different points of view. There are different points of view on trade. I do not think that people who are terrible people, terrible human beings, because they disagree with me on trade. That is their view. They disagree with me on health care. That's called democracy. That is a good thing. But there are areas that I would have hoped that in the year 2016 we would have put behind us. And that is to say that we treat people with equality. that in the year 2016 we're not going to discriminate against somebody because that person is a Muslim, or that person is a woman, or that person is gay. I would have hoped that in the year 2016 we have gone beyond that those are battles that have been won already. And I will not retreat on those issues. On the other hand, if Donald Trump comes up with an idea or a program which he campaigned on that says that our infrastructure is crumbling, that we can create millions of jobs rebuilding our infrastructure, that we can put people back to work at decent wages, yeah, I will work with him. If he comes up with if he is consistent with his views that our trade policies have failed American workers and that we need to rethink our trade policies, yes, I will work with him. So I think there are areas, and the other area that I will fight him tooth and nail is this issue of climate change, which we have got to focus much more attention on. The future of this planet is at stake. And we have got to bring together people to demand that Mr. Trump listen to the scientists, not the fossil fuel industry.
We've got 4 minutes left. Quick last question from Eric Garcia. Eric, from the Hill.
Sorry, I got a raspy voice. Senator Sanders, there's a lot of talk about the fact that a third of the counties that voted for President Obama went for Mr. Trump. A lot of people in Michigan and Ohio didn't. They voted on down ballot. They didn't vote for president. Next, you're in charge of Democratic outreach. You say you want to get more people involved and get them out to vote. Four Democrats are up for re-election in the four Rust Belt states: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin are up for re-election in 2018. A, do you think that they have enough appeal to be able to win re-election? And B, you talk a lot about it. What are the things that they can do to kind of appeal to those white working class voters that may have voted for Obama in 08 and 12, but then broke for Trump?
I think the answer is, I'm not into speculation. I don't know what's going to happen in 2 years. But what I believe, and I have believed it from day one, is that the progressive vision of America, which is to say that if you work 40 hours a week in this country, you have to earn a living wage. I think when you talk about that, when you talk about pay equity for women, when you talk about creating millions of jobs by rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, when you talk about joining the rest of the industrialized world and guaranteeing health care to all as a right and paid family and medical leave, when you talk about demanding that the wealthy and large corporations start paying their fair share of taxes so that we address income and wealth inequality, when you talk about creating millions of jobs by transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel into energy efficiency and sustainable energy, to answer your question, if those candidates run on those issues, yeah, they will win.
I want to thank you for coming, sir. I want to thank Mrs. Sanders for joining you, and look forward to having you back, sir. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Senator, if you dusted off your Screen Actors Guild card for the show with your friend, with Larry David.
Well. Okay, I owe somebody. Yeah.